Hello, everybody. It is the Sappy Sorcerer. I'm not sure if you read Sappy Serial, but a Sappy Sorcerer is rarely, if ever, late. And today, it is 111 right now, and we are recording. This is the fifth day in a row that I am doing a live, more in the sense of a broadcast. I don't know, just kind of doing it, trying to habitualize showing up. And showing up for yourself is the most important thing you can do. Disciplinary stuff, and we can all get better. I started with just doing post-its. I did short films. I've done a lot of other stuff, but just want to give you a quick summary. Very happy with how this week went. It didn't go as planned, just in general. Just want to let everyone know that things don't go according to plan. I missed Maddox's show this week. I was a little frustrated with myself about that, but he did great. Actually missed one of my friend's birthdays, but I remembered a few hours later. And today, I'm going to go into the cardology a bit because when you are born, the day you were born is always going to be your Mercury day, so the day of the week you were born. So they talk a lot about that in Destiny, but it has to deal with how humans have designed the world. So this is probably thousands of thousands and thousands of years old. Is it 100% accurate? I think it's supposed to ask us questions and we look into it, or it gives us options. So that being said, for me, Sunday is a Mercury day, and today would be Friday, which is a Neptune day. So the planets have different meanings. Mercury is a communication planet. So certain Sundays I've noticed I can be quite talkative. One of my favorite routines for a while, a couple of years ago, it was starting early on Sundays. I was off. I've had jobs where I worked Sundays, and I've had jobs where I didn't work Sundays. So Sunday is it's usually a day that everything's just a little bit different. Nothing is actually different, but hours are different, schedule's different. It's just a universally agreed upon day of rest, difference, just something different. So that's my Mercury day, and I feel like sometimes if I apply myself, I can have good Sundays. It's a good day to, for me anyway, to reach out to people because people are more available on Sundays, or sometimes they have a little bit more time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, and then Venus Monday. So Venus is like love. So sometimes they say taking care, doing something good for yourself can be good on that day. And then you go to Mars. Mars is kind of your action planet, or your aggressive. I have Mars in Aries, so I can be aggressive when I'm kind of confident in my ideas. So it's something I've learned to how to kind of deal with myself. And you go through Jupiter day, or you do, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Jupiter's like a giving day. So maybe that's the day it's payday for you, or maybe something happens, on Wednesdays. And then Thursday is a Saturn, so that can be a day of lessons or rules. Saturn is not always bad, but a lot of people go bad because it's like eating your vegetables and not, like, in theory, not saying I'm not telling anyone what to do. I'm just saying that theory of, those lessons we learn. Enjoy your childhood, which none of us ever thinks to do until we get older. Like, oh wow, I wish I would have enjoyed it more, and yada yada yada. So today for me would be a Uranus day. People say Uranus, Uranus. Uranus is currently in Gemini, and that's the planet of, that is the thing of change. I've mentioned it before. In terms of the world, it changes, it comes around every 70 years ish, or based on how I saw it, a lot of very pivotal world events have happened with Uranus and Gemini. Pivotal. But we also have, excuse me, Pluto in Aquarius, so that could mean something different. So, with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in to Sappy Sorcerer's Soapbox. It's the fifth day in a row, And why I'm late. So Uranus throws a monkey wrench in everything. So today's a Uranus day for me. Despite getting up earlier and getting started probably right on time, it took me a little bit longer to get through my editing today of Sappy Says. At least the way I'm doing it now. I'm trying to tap into the energy before I do it. And I start my morning with a walk, and I like to do a little bit of journalistic digging. So that's something I've always been good at is research. I like doing research papers. I just didn't like being graded on them, if that makes any sense. I like doing the research, and I knew these things, and then it was presenting the argument, and then you realize, well, that's what life is about, and that's what the education was teaching you. And your motivation to do assignments, motivation to do in life, but there are times I think as you get older, there might be certain assignments that you're like, yeah, I knocked that one out of the park. And it means probably nothing to anybody but you. But that's the lesson to be learned, I think, through education. I think it's important. It's a challenging situation, circumstances. I don't know how to fix it right now, and I'm not going to offer any ideas into it. I'm just going to offer ideas in how to continue learning, educating. Um, Things are changing. So today just want to say I got started early, so I was hoping to do this everything. By the time I was done editing, it was 9 o'clock, and I was thinking of doing like the director's experiment episodes. So Stanley Kubrick we did yesterday. Based on what I did number two when I was doing in 2010, it would have been Terry Gilliam. And I was doing a quick reading, and then there was a word I used that in 2010 I don't know if I'd use today, and I didn't know if I wanted to publish this immediately. It, I think it was because it's a word he used to describe himself, but I didn't feel comfortable. Um, Not a bad word. They had a movie with that title, uh, but I don't know. I really thought about it. I'm like, well, do I want to go straight in order, and do I want to talk about directors? Because I did that, and some of my Sappy says it goes based on what I was thinking. I kind of think of what do I keep coming back to? What am I trying to say? What am I trying to release? I'm in like a nine of spades period, so I'm gifted with an eight, I believe. So it's not bad, but right now I'm trying to let go. And going back to Batman Forever earlier this week it was so big. I don't know why. And the thing is, it's like I've watched the movie since I was a kid, and I just think my general aura of how I spoke about it didn't match how I felt about it. And I know that's a silly thing, but even seeing the watch and that nostalgia and being like, I think I would buy that watch, but I think I would want more than one. Like, I know I've mentioned that, but it resonated and tapped into that. I was like, wow. And I had a lot of fun putting like the action figures, and I wish I could do more. But for Sappy Says, it's a nice minute introduction. I like to think of it as a almost greatest hits of a subject. I like this nostalgia journalism I think I've been heading towards. I think people really appreciate it. And even the day before with Aqua Teen Hunger Force, I kind of used the opportunity to have a little more fun with the idea of the show and being meta with the show and the show. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And that was there was a different point in Sappy's life, and Sappy has walked away from a lot. Sappy's doing, Sappy learned a lot of things. And Sappy with Shawn Miles, you know, the combination of us, the two of us, Sappy's been around different times in Gemini, but Sappy and Shawn this is the form. What does that mean? You'll have to stay tuned. It's a lot of fun. But anyway, so today's episode was on Star Wars for Sappy Says. It was actually on Shadows of the Empire. And Shadows of the Empire is a Star Wars video game, but actually its original creation was not because of a video game. The idea of, I think it was 95, maybe it was 94. I should do a quick check. The best thing I can do if you're listening to podcasts is just continue talking. But if you're actually watching the video, you see me looking at the phone. So remember John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. People watched the presidential debate on TV and then they listened to it. the people who listened to it didn't have the same expectations or thoughts of who won by the people who watched it. And that just goes to show you the importance of video. Video killed the radio star, they like to say. Um, but yeah, I just want to take a little bit of a second to take a breathe there. Okay, so 1996. So for Star Wars, I'm gonna have to take you back maybe before carbon emissions or their carbon emissions. 30 something years ago, maybe about 30. No, more than 30. So for the Sappy Sorcerer, at least what Sean's telling me, Star Wars was kind of always around when he was younger, but it was one of those things that I don't think registered when you're when you're a child. It's Star Wars, unless you're introduced to it. Like How I Met Your Mother, that's a very pivotal point, and the home video releases based on the day and date of it is one of the little details that home video nerds like myself like. Um, it's actually, and the best part is it's Fox. Of course, Fox would had the Fox titles to do it. It's a really nice little detail. They kind of talk about them going through the trilogy. And for a pop culture thing, that goes for a lot of people. People who don't get it, don't get it. So Star Wars was there. I remember seeing toys. I remember seeing Super Star Wars, but it wasn't like everywhere. It was in the store. I remember seeing on WB11 a lot. Like you would see Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and I'd see clips here and there. And remember, if you're following along from the beginning, I had a Magnavox. This is from 92, or it had to be 93 because I gotta find the model. But it was a TV VCR, so I watched a lot of movies on that. And if you think Christopher Nolan rolls his eyes at you watching your movie on a phone, just, imagine what he would think of me watching Star Wars on this TV. Kid doesn't know any better. Kid wants to watch a movie. This is that. When I talked to Tavis had a TV with a headphone jack. Just imagine how great that is for a kid. Um, or, bedtime and you can't sleep and you can't explain it to your parents, so you're going to stay up and watch it. So, Star Wars, always in that mind. It was on Muppet Babies. I've seen references. Star Wars, and I remember they had toy lines. So it was always there, but it wasn't the event. And it had been. But I was a kid in the 90s, and where I was at, no one who was marketing is selling towards me. They're selling towards maybe parents to introduce me, but they can't sell to me. So, I'm going to talk about the Star Wars releases, but I'm going to talk about my introduction into it. Go forward, and then I'm going to go backwards and tell you, but my entry point into Star Wars has a lot to do with my story. Um, Gotta have a little bit of tea. So, in 1997, the Star Wars special editions came out in movie theaters January 31st, February 21st, and March 14th. At the time, the Sorcerer's father, Sean's father, we'll learn more about that. We would rent the video Friday night from the video store, so we watched the original edition, and then the following morning or afternoon, we'd watch the special edition. And I recall the movie theater, it was in a mall. I recall walking past and seeing people there. I remember seeing the posters. It was kind of a big deal, and I didn't know what to expect. I've never experienced Star Wars all the way through. I never had someone that asked the questions, and Pop was there to do that for me. I had recently, this year, returned to that same mall. It's still there at the movie theater, and the movie theater is not, I don't know if it's the same brand. It's an AMC now. There's a bar. So that's really cool. The MacGuffins. And I think back to like maybe the 90s, and I'm like, I think I remember seeing Goldeneye or stuff like that. I remember just this movie theater, and I haven't been there since, but I remember that was one that I'd go to a lot. Then I haven't been back, but, um, leading up to that, they, um, they had several releases. I'm gonna talk about that in a second, but my introduction to Star Wars, so watched it on, my dad's TV. It was maybe 20 inches, 27. It was not that bad, bigger than mine. And then we watched in the theater, and I remember being blown away. I was 8, so this is the coolest thing on the planet. Um, the 3 movies, they're presented. I didn't know how old they were, and based on the new footage, I was more excited for it. So I was that right age, kind of like Batman Forever. Looking back, of course, I have opinions, and I'll talk more about that later. But as a kid, my eyes were dropped, and the first Star Wars had the additional Jabba scene, which is not necessary. I appreciate its being there, but people have said it. But as a kid, seeing that scene and seeing Jabba, I was like, cool, but it doesn't really make too much sense in terms of respect and all that. But George Lucas made the decision, and it's his movie. And I remember loving that scene as a kid. So I makeshift, different parents. So you had different editions and different parts of your life. So I had the Star Wars special edition, and then I had the regular editions of the other two. Not that they just weren't as different. I don't think, just because I wanted that additional scene. There are other enhancements I learned later, which, I would finally see, I think, fully in, 2005 or 6 when the DVDs came out, because they did the laser discs onto that. So, um, watching those movies was a big feeling, and then I remember it was everywhere. This was that I was that age, and then this is just like them dropping the Star Wars, like, explosion, fireworks everywhere. Not really, marketing-wise. It was at Pizza Hut, it was at Taco Bell, just the trilogy re-release, and then after this, Shadows of the Empire would come out on N64, and I'd learn about that and learn that was an interquel, and the whole getting back to Shadows of the Empire was made in 1996, so the Star Wars plan for the last 5 years of the 90s is one of the best things George Lucas has ever pulled off. George Lucas owned the rights to everything Star Wars with the exception of A New Hope, which was owned by Fox. When Disney bought Lucasfilm, they got everything but the original, and then when they bought Fox, they got the original. They have everything. We're gonna go a little bit more into his influences in a little bit, but I just want to give you a little bit of just a little bit of that feeling of 1995. He does the THX mastered versions, and it's one last time. And this is the marketing. So when I would rent the tapes, because my dad had them, mom didn't. So dad had the special edition VHS. He had the full screen. I think if he would have had Laserdisc or would he would have been into it, but just wasn't. So I remember that gold box. It's in the video. I remember getting it from the video store. I remember seeing the platinum one that was widescreen, and then it's really cool if you have both of them. But seeing the movies, and then I think it was in August '97. And, you think Terminator 2, right? Judgment Day, but that didn't happen. Star Wars came out, and I just remember everywhere there was Star Wars stuff, and it was a big deal. And the thing is, um, seeing that collection was cool, but didn't have tapes or they didn't have Star Wars specifically, or I guess it was more my dad was more into Star Wars. So in the video, I talk about going to I go to Pizza Hut. I remember Empire Strikes Back in it was the one last time. So this is after I'd seen it in '97, but maybe 90, maybe the same year. But they had this was the series. So this was Star Wars. This was Empire Strikes Back, and then they did Return of the Jedi was a tape. This is actually the marketing book that they send out to some of the things. I love these tapes. This is probably one of my favorite designs. I've seen people on Reddit do the entire saga with this, so I think that's amazing. That's what I love about the internet and certain artists just tackling it. But this talks about um, just non-parents, parents, colorful. This gives you marketing from 1995 of how they do it. They had like uh, Kellogg's. They're talking about it. They have the displays, tapes. If you want the boxes, the trilogy, everything. So I didn't see this campaign, but I love this campaign. This is what I would see in the video stories. This is what was already around. So this was the used stuff. But this is press releases, news clippings. I actually got this on eBay and I had done a review of a VHS unboxing. Didn't watch it, I just wanted to do it when I started my journey being a content creator. So I was like, let me buy stuff and do content. And I realized since I've returned to it so many times, I clearly want to talk about it. So I guess that's why we're here today. So we're at 80%, so we're not too far into the episode. I haven't wasted too much time yet. But the Star Wars trilogy. So I remember Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut had boxes, and you could color in the boxes. They had toys. Then you'd go to Taco Bell. Pepsi had it. And this was 1997. And then this previous promo was 95. So I'm, growing up. First grade, second, third, and it keeps getting 95. This release was probably, I wasn't watching. I probably was around and probably seen it, but it was kind of already it was already done by the time special editions came out 2 years later, all new boxes, because Star Wars kept doing that. So Shadows of the Empire, 1996, right after they do this campaign, they had an idea. What if we released a campaign? What if we pretended we did a Star Wars movie, but we didn't have a Star Wars movie? And they're like, what? And they had a story. It was a novel. It's now a Star Wars legend, unfortunately. I hope they adapt it. I mean, it's up to them. Maybe someone could get the rights to it and do an animated version. It's a very great story. But they did this Shadows of the Empire. I think Lucas commissioned it. This book had a soundtrack. It had an action figure line. It had a video game tie-in eventually the next year. It had this whole release, but there was no movie. And they wanted to see the marketing machine. And that's what I love about Star Wars marketing. I can't think of Star Wars without thinking of the marketing, but I love marketing because of Star Wars, and I like Star Wars marketing. Like, I love the fact that people still have their Pizza Hut boxes from 1995 because of this. And in 1995, the movie had been around since 1977, and people had foresight. 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old version of me did not have this foresight, unfortunately. But I'm glad I was able to have all these experiences with the tapes. I was able to watch them, use them, because you see them in the sealed. It's cool that these exist, but just imagine never watching them when you're growing up. So they had that. They had the laser discs. So now Lucas has done 95 one last time. VHS, THX, and Laserdisc of the original trilogies. 1996 is completely Shadows of the Empire. No movies, everything but. 1997 theatrical distribution. We have Pepsi tie-in. He's not making anything new. He made little additions. All new special editions of the movies for the first-time audiences for kids. Taco Bell. This is a full-on marketing. So we're in '97. This is full. I remember seeing those Star Wars special edition posters in um, Taco Bell, and I remember loving them so much. And later, I like the originals, but it's just like this. That was my entry point. And I fought so much against nostalgia like last couple of decades because I'm like, oh, let it go. And um, there's a period in people's lives where it's difficult. I think it's that changing the guard period where they hit a certain era where the people in the world that they like were born in are starting to get older, and the people who have come in since that we've grown to love and learn and we've seen their whole lives. It's unique, and I know a lot of people talk about that when they learn about history, of finding out historical figures occupied the planet at the same time, had huge influences, yet never met. Or maybe they did. So, um, but yeah, still talking about Star Wars. We have 77%, and it's 1977. Star Wars, the first one, is like a loving homage to Akira Kurosawa. George Lucas put his heart and soul into this movie, and this movie defined his entire life. He did more than Star Wars, but this was the gift that kept giving. He passed out from exhaustion. He had to fight to get his friends to understand it. He sacrificed. He held on. He merchandised. He This was his baby. He eventually passed it on to Disney, which it's not a bad choice. And seeing as they have the Muppets, maybe we'll have a Muppet Babies release sometime this century. Just hoping. But I think Lucas pioneered so many things. He did THX based on his movie, right? THX Sound. No, I'm sorry. THX remastering. Skywalker Sound. He helped pioneer Final Cut, which Pixar. George Lucas had his hand in so many of these things, and he did a lot of things for the business. And Star Wars is just one of his best creative outputs. Um, I'm very thankful that he did it, and I'm sure when he was thinking in 1976, 1975, when he did it, he didn't know if it was going to be what it was today. It was just this movie he had to do, and he was supposed to do Apocalypse Now, and as Francis Ford Coppola said, well, he had Star Wars. He didn't have to do it anymore. And George Lucas has a very different career than the rest of his brethren, but it's not like he's not there, he's not present. He knocked it out of the park so much. Like Spielberg himself was a brand, but I think George Lucas with Star Wars just created this vast universe, and especially with Comic Cons coming up in the 70s, it was this perfect cultural thing. And when you see a VH1 show I really liked was When Blank Ruled the World. They did When Kiss Ruled the World and When Star Wars Ruled the World. And I love pop culture in the 70s because pop culture in the 70s versus every generation before of it, really, that's kind of the birth, I guess, where we are now, because that's where the action figures. Not saying it wasn't there with Superman, but I think at least your modern fan could go back. And then when you go back any further, I find that maybe it might be harder for younger people. Not saying maybe it isn't, maybe I'm wrong, but when I was a kid, I can understand silent films because I think my family, people I knew watched it, or you met people that had seen it, or they tell you their experiences, and you see these on documentaries. Like Ken Burns did so many. He did Empire of the Air, and he talked to people who first heard radio ever. And had he not done that, we might not have that today. And that's the importance, I think, of any single content creator. Um, I know Dark Side of the Ring, I bring that up a lot, but they create content for a program, but I'd like to think like they have they are getting to live the dream and getting to help it and hear people tell their stories. And if anything, I was really glad that Paul Orndorff's son got to talk about him because I didn't know that. I thought it was such a good episode. I really just want to go back on that real quick. But content creators, um, Star Wars 97 for me, right? My introduction, kind of like Batman Forever, was my introduction to that marketing world. Not that they had been around, but that was, I think, the first time I understood it was everywhere. I'd see it in different places, and I remember really liking the images that they presented to me. And you'd see the toy tie-in, like, you'd figure it out. Like Batman Forever, I remember Batman Returns vaguely, but Batman Forever was like I was old enough to know what was going on. I remember I was able to make choices at what I wanted. Which watch do you want? I want that watch. And when I saw that watch again, I saw myself looking down at the watch over the course of a few decades and then eventually parting with the watch. And being upset that I did and didn't bother to keep it to change the battery. But I let it go and I think about how much I've done since then. So, as always, that little nostalgic wish and wonder that I have with it. But with today being late, sorry, this is going to be all right. But so Star Wars, The New Hope, we have Akira Kurosawa has a very big influence. And when this came out, it was just Star Wars. You'll find that out if you watch the original version of it. But in 1997, George Lucas had promised that the 1995 ones were the last time it was going to be available, and he would redo it. And he was really to his word. So 1997, we have the special edition, and then 1999, Star Wars Episode 1 starts a whole new trilogy. So 6, 7, 8, now I'm growing up with this, and I'm loving everything. And the Star Wars VHS trilogy was eventually re-released to match the new prequel trilogy, which they ultimately never finished on VHS in America, anyway, for 3, which is a little disappointing. And part of one of those things is generationally, when you're transitioning from format to format, franchises start on one and finish on another and never complete. The Simpsons, I remember I said in a live, they said on season 1, welcome to the first of many overpriced deluxe box sets, something along those lines, that will be on an inferior format, and they're not wrong. It was not 1, but 2. And Fox themselves gave up. And it's a little disappointing, but the Simpsons DVDs for those first 10 years, commentaries on every single episode, so you know that had to do something with it, but all the episodes are available for the most part on Disney, Fox, streaming. With the commentaries, I don't know. Um, but I don't know. I just think that's a interesting opportunity. And after these prequels came out, Star Wars was different forever for everybody. So one of the things I know this is bizarre, but I used to think when I was a kid, younger, of celebrities or people who had passed, and for some reason I was like, they never got to see the Star Wars prequels, and I know that's idiotic. And like, oh, you're not, I wish I was still alive to see that. That's what they think. But I for some reason wondered what Andre the Giant would have thought of the prequels. He passed in 93, they came out in 99. I think he would have rather been alive, but I honestly thought that. I don't know why. Just thought it. And even people I know who have passed before that came out, who were big fans, I was curious of that. And then I know they did a fan movie. It's gonna drive me. I think it was Fanboys, and it was about someone seeing episode 1. We're gonna get to episode 1 because episode 1 is its own entity. Because I can't explain to you, but that is you draw a circle around that, and the Star Wars Special Edition trilogy leading into that, and then what comes from the prequel trilogy from that. I will get to that in a second, but Star Wars just always had that special thing for me. I remember pizza. It's always there. The tapes, I watched it on VHS. I watched it on very poor quality. I bought the DVDs in 2004 for the first time with that nice, beautiful documentary, Empire of Dreams. Very good. Then they did the Blu-ray set in 2011. And then they had more DVD versions, like when they gave the Laserdisc, but they always have the first, then they have subsequent. But usually the first is where they put all the stuff into it. And then they did a re-release and on 4K, and what we have with Disney is what we have. If there was one wish I had for Disney, I wish that they would swallow their pride, pair up with Criterion, and they could pair up with multiple boutique labels. That way, multiple resources, focus on different things, and just do this home video love letter to Star Wars, referencing everything, having every cut, even having a documentary. I think this would sell. Now, you don't have to make it in super expensive, but it could be at a premium level. I really, really, really think people would like it. Every version. And you have multiple people working on it. I know Disney's very protective, but Disney, look into your fans. Fans have sometimes sourced some amazing projects. Uh, Bob Dylan, some of the fans have sourced live recordings. Stanley Kubrick his stuff has been found in basements. So little rant there, but um, even throughout my life, other people talking about Star Wars. I remember in middle school, someone brought their Star Wars collection in. It was the VHS, and it was the 1990 version. I had not seen this version, and it was pristine, it was beautiful, and it was the CBS Fox ones, but I think it was a second release where they released it in a trilogy, and it had a little flap. And I remember I'd seen those the first time, but I hadn't seen them since. Or I never went back to get those because the remastered 1995 ones are still the most original with the best resolution, because they did do those on laserdiscs. And the laserdisc covers for these are just they're a little bit better than the VHS because they're wider, but just this whole campaign, this half face, it just it always brings back good memories. And I remember I had 2 and 3, but not 1. And then the box had the trilogy in one, so I always wish they would have done something different for the outer box. You'll notice they do that sometimes with slipcases. They'll have the main one on the outer, and then it repeats for the first one. Little gripe, not like they didn't have more Star Wars characters to pull from, but they chose Darth Vader, a Stormtrooper, and Yoda to represent the trilogy. And then the whole one last time and this whole marketing thing, which seemed to be true. These versions were the ones on the 2005 DVD. They sourced it from the Laserdisc. So it's like, we don't actually have it. And I thought that, I don't know if that's foolish of Lucas, or maybe he didn't think so at the time because it's like it's the same movie. But the people who watched in 1977, 1980, 1983, 1985, 1987, 1999, 1992, 1995, they want that version. And I really do understand that. I used to be economic, just want the one, but the fans sometimes prove me wrong. 20 million people are ready to relive the experience. And then on the back, the power of the Force will be with you as never before. Last issue of the original Star Wars. They did do a DVD, but it was the last actual. They didn't do anything new. They sourced disc 2 from a Laserdisc. Digitally mastered in THX, contemporary new packaging. That's actually a feature, but that's what I liked about it. It was very 90s. Exclusive George Lucas interviews, 20 million households register. I don't know if that was true. 16 million in consumer advertising campaign that begins this summer and continues through December. Kellogg promotion on over 40 million packages, worldwide internet promotion to 30 million households. This is 1995, worldwide internet. So I didn't get onto the internet like fully until a few years later, but this is just the apex, and I really do, like, I didn't work at any video stores, but they have, like, all the different stands, trolleys, and if you did get to work at places and set this up, if you did work there, sometimes you got to take it home because they just trashed it. They didn't know what to do with it. They didn't need it. So, Star Wars marketing, just as important as Star Wars the brand. Like, I see this S and I see this S, the Star Wars. I see that logo. That's it. That transports me back to when I first saw it. It's been there. It's been the same since 1977. And I think about areas of my life or geographic locations that I occupied when this had came across my peripheral. And I remember meeting people who didn't get this, and there were times where I tried to distance myself because I wanted to be cool. I think I was less cool for doing that. And with Star Wars, it's like I didn't Harry Potter was around when I was at the right age, I just didn't watch it. And I watched it later and I liked it and I wished I would have read and watched the movies growing up, but I just didn't. Sometimes I just don't. And you look back and you're like, wow, that's a cultural opportunity that I missed because I didn't show up. And you think to yourself, well, you can't do that, but sometimes, I was part of the Pokemon journey at the beginning, and to see it now, I'm just like surprised. The Pokemon cards are everywhere. I thought they would have died out because I remember when I stopped, I lost interest in them. Not that they probably gained money. I probably could have had a nice career doing that if I stayed with it. Not gonna lie. It's just, I was tired of showing up for it. I got it. I went on to do other things. I've come back to it and almost missed the fact that they didn't do it. So I'm glad others continue to do that. Just like with Star Wars, I'm glad it continued on. So, Star Wars, we had 97. This is all this introduction. I have Shadows of the Empire. I'm making this video, and I'm surprised how long I'm spending on it. I'm feeling emotional. And then I think that's like a two-part story here. I'm going to do this all in one video, but for Sappy Says, Shadows of the Empire and the Star Wars trilogy for me is like the 90s up until 1999. Two different worlds, and then The Phantom Menace coming out when it did. I was Jake Lloyd's age. Jake Lloyd was in Jingle All the Way, so Anakin Skywalker, you know he's going to be bad, but he's not. This movie was so freaking big. Like, I think it had one of the biggest domestic box offices. I remember seeing it in the theater. I remember every single supermarket. Lay's potato chips had Queen Amidala, and I remember I was a little sick of it, and then years after you'd see it, if I paid you $100 and you let me walk into 1999 store with everything, I would be so happy. Just the model. And perhaps that's something maybe we could do with AI, virtual reality, is just at least redesign. It might be work, but you think of some of these videos people do, you can redesign a augmented reality, almost Star Trek Next Generation, three-dimensional space where you can walk through spaces at different times. Why would you want to do this? I don't know, but for nostalgia purposes, and the more I go into nostalgia, I find it interesting because people talk about it, but I think, and there's probably more research on it, but I've been having fun tapping into my own nostalgia and learning about other people's. But 1999, like, I think of this one specific supermarket. It's not around anymore. The building's not there anymore. I think it's a car dealership or something else now. And I think there was a Blockbuster next to it. And I remember there was so many Star Wars Episode 1. Like, Star Wars Episode 1 was just so licensed. And they overkilled it, but Lucas came back with such a fury. And this is 1999. So 1995, Lucas has his trilogy for the last time. 1996, he has Shadows of the Empire. 1997, he re-releases the entire trilogy, probably makes so much money on existing content, reissues those in a VHS packaging, and that's all leading to a brand new trilogy, which I don't think I was in on as a kid, but because sad part here, between Star Wars trilogy and Episode 1, Sappy's dad became the Rolling Stone. So Sappy has this curiosity of these three films that came out, the prequels, what his padre would say. And then, of course, there was the subsequent sequels, but let's start small. The prequel series I grew up with as a young adult to a teenager. So Star Wars had been there from me throughout my entire grade school into high school and finishing the trilogy, and it felt complete. I remember, walking through the halls, you have this when you have a locker and Episode 3 came out. It was different. It had I remember the Burger King tie-in. I love Star Wars tie-ins. I can see people collecting it. I'm glad they did collect it. They had 6 watches at Burger King, and they celebrated each one. The DVDs had come out 2004, so we had episode 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. We were waiting for 3 to have that complete set. It came out, and I remember I played the game before the movie. But growing up with those, each one was a different experience. Star Wars Episode 1 was VHS. They re-released the trilogy to match that. And then by the time Episode 2 came out, I was on DVDs now. And Episode 1, I think, came out not too far after Episode 2. And I think they only did widescreen. And I remember the DVD, because 1, 2, and 3 had separate releases. And then the trilogy originally was only available as a trilogy. Then they did separate releases and steelbooks for Blu-ray, etc., etc. Like, your access to get them at the time shaped how you grew up with them. And now, all I'm not saying back in my day, this I'm not saying that. I'm just educating my process of learning. So not having it was a part of our lives, I think. And a lot of maybe younger people don't realize what's like not to have access. They might not have immediate access to it, but they might have to do a little searching. And just imagine having to wait for years for certain products or things to come out. So that was what Star Wars was. But episode one, I can go back to that, and like it was such a banner year for me. I made some videos, but I remember WWF Attitude came out that year, and that was when Acclaim left and THQ came in with their legendary run of WrestleMania 2000 and WWF No Mercy. And this is coming off of their work from WCW, NWO, World Tour, Revenge, and all these other games that were around with Star Wars. So this period, wrestling's changing, Star Wars is changing. The media I'm putting in to watch, it's changing from a tape to a disc. And as a kid, similar to the death card, if you look at the death card, everyone sat on the card except the kid. And the death is not always bad. Sometimes death is the way of doing the way things you've used to do it as. And I remember like when I had the VHS or DVD and I wanted to go Blu-ray, what are you going to throw them all away? And I was like, no, you can sell them, but certain collectors have everything, and I really respect them for holding on because it's not easy. It's not easy to like holding on to an investment. We have impulses, we want things, you know. So kudos to those. But Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace on PlayStation. Great game. I love playing as Liam Neeson, and it had a sandboxness levels. Uh It would Star Wars Episode 1 was everywhere. Episode 2 was a little bit, I would say from 1, 2, and 3, 1 was the most, 2 was a little bit lower. Not lower, but I feel like they didn't go as hard. There was a lot of stuff. And as a kid, seeing teenage Anakin was exciting. I was like, all right, let's see where he starts becoming Vader. Because there was a jump. Like, The Phantom Menace sets up the space politics, and I can like it has so much hate, but Darth Maul, I need to rewatch all these movies because the prequels, like Batman Forever, I think I crapped on them. And then maybe the new sequels came out, and then I look back at the prequels. Not that they were amazing, but maybe I was just too harsh, and I need to look back at how I watched them when I first watched them. And the sequels, that's a whole other topic. I don't know if I'm in the right heads or was in the right headspace to watch them. I'm happy that people can identify with Star Wars today, and it's so different. If anything, I would like maybe someone to like talk me through what they're going through and their experiences are through it, since I kind of missed it voluntarily, so that's my regret. But I know I've watched the first season of Mandalorian, and they've had a lot of content, but I I found it like with the MCU, like Disney, since they had the money, were able to create so many stories. But I felt that last sequel trilogy, they didn't really have a cohesive plan, and they kind of wanted to do what Lucas had done and had a better foresight of doing. If people like the movies, then I would love to hear why, and maybe I can actually see them in a different light at some point. But also, I think they'd probably be a good representation of when they came out. Is there an opportunity to do a new Star Wars trilogy? Yes, but I think you have to be brave. Listen to George Lucas, ask him, and then, if anything, have him on and see if someone else could do it. James Mangold did Indiana Jones 5, still have not seen it. Not refusing to see it, just haven't seen it. I don't think I was ready for that goodbye to Indiana Jones just yet. I know Harrison Ford is still alive and I need to still see it. But Crystal Skull, I have a really interesting relationship. That movie came out the same year Iron Man and The Dark Knight came out. And the marketing, oh my God, it was great. It was like Burger King had the Whopper, and then we had Iron Man was at 7-Eleven or something. And then it was such a great sequence of movies. 2008 was fantastic. And then later I find out Hellboy 2 came out. Worst possible release date ever, but um we were very blessed in 2008, and looking back, I don't hate Crystal Skull. I don't love it. But Shia LaBeouf is fantastic in that movie. And I'm like, wow, he's really good. And he took the script without reading it. He said, I want to be in a Spielberg Indiana Jones movie. And Spielberg, like he said in Indiana Jones Temple of Doom, like he said he was in a bad place or and for E.T., for the special edition, they actually did some changes which were controversial, and then they changed it back. So I don't even think you can find those versions because George Lucas inspired Spielberg, but Spielberg was inspired to go back. So, always interesting with all the Star Wars, like Lucas, it's his product. He can do what he wants. Um, just the 90s and the 2000s, I'm glad Star Wars was there for me because the other thing is it showed you this path and it didn't make sense at the time. But as you get older, you see some of these dark paths, Anakin of wanting to hold on. And even when you meet Shmi and sorry, getting a little choked up. These stories do have meaning and they're generational and they could be shared. So I don't know. I was just very moved and it pushed me back a bit. I spent so much time just locked in that first period of when I was exposed to Star Wars in the media, and then of in that video, I didn't do anything of episode one. If anything, episode one deserves its own, for me personally, its own little shrine of just how one singular movie made so much of a global impact on marketing, consumerism, just it had the power to do it. And 1999 was crowded. Spy Who Shagged Me, one of my favorite Austin Powers. Watching the teaser, there's like, if you see one movie this year, see Star Wars. Everyone was terrified of Star Wars. This franchise is returning after 16 years. And, we think now 16 years ago was 2010. But, and what happened in 2010? Star Wars, the last one, had been released 5 years before that. So it's like, this is even longer gap. Well, between 2005, it was 10 years from episode 3 to episode 7, but 16. And I don't know, that George Lucas 90s, 2000s run of marketing, that final dose, because up until 2015, he was still in charge of the company, but I think those that that stretch, that decade, 1995 to 2005, from George Lucas said, "Last time I'm going to release these movies, and then I'm going to finish the trilogy," and he did it in 10 years. That's another thing. Like James Cameron's made like his saga, and I think maybe it's coming to an end. But George Lucas had done the movies, and then he said he started a plan. He had it. I don't know if he had this to begin with, but in 10 years, he re-released the trilogy for the last time. Shadows of the Empire showed his marketing skills and he can release products. Special edition, he re-released movies that Disney method, his own, like, of course, in conjunction with Fox. Tie-ins with Taco Bell, Pepsi, which would prove beneficial from 1997 and 1999. It was so big, I can't explain to you. This thing was everywhere. Star Wars Episode 1 owned 1999. Like, almost as much as Prince owns a song, if you went back into 1999, it's impossible. Like, there's so much merchandise, toys, everything. I want to see a complete set of that. Would I want it? Yes. Would I know how to store it? No. But would I want someone who has it and they have the experience to pay a ticket, have them walk me through it? Sure. And that's where the content creators have it. All of you can do this. There's a guy who has the largest pinball machine collection in the world. He decided to do that. And I thought, if I started today, I don't know if I could do that. But he has this collection. I could go see it. I could talk to him. Theoretically, not saying he'd want to talk to me. Like, who's this weirdo with makeup? But just goes to show you. And Star Wars had pinball machines. Had everything. And this franchise got me into it got me into the product as much as the process of you watching the product. And I talk a lot about wrestling, but wrestling for these people, the promoting it is they're promoting a predetermined fight. I was going to say the other word, but I don't want to hurt anyone and I don't want to get hurt. It's a predetermined outcome, but everything they do is designed to make you believe. And Star Wars does that. And this marketing wanted them to get it to their kids. And I grew up in that target demographic. I was that kid. I love that marketing. And today, like I've seen it since and I don't like it, but that's me not looking at it. And Star Wars is luckily, I think sometimes like Bob Dylan, the Beatles, Elvis, they're so overcovered, maybe some people hate them. I myself have been frustrated with Star Wars. I'm a Beatles fan. Sometimes I felt they're overplayed, but then I'm like, they deserve it. They deserve their Beatles monopoly. They deserve Star Wars monopoly. So my discomfort in having opinions that aligned with popular were frustrating because I was like, tried. I'm not saying I was a hipster. People told me I was, but it wasn't my goal. And I think I just was fighting something inside myself. But for me, those 6 Star Wars movies will be important. And then, even then, it was teaching me Star Wars wasn't just the movies. And I am friends with people who grew up with the original Star Wars. Like, they saw them when they came out. And I've seen people who grew up on them late 80s. They grew up on them with the VHS. And I myself with the special editions. And I've met people that grew up with the prequels and then the originals and then the sequels. And it's all fun talking to them because they all have different perspectives, different entry points. And when people, even How I Met Your Mother, they have that Ewok theory. Accurate. I love the Ewoks when I was a kid, and I'm like, oh, I hate them. I think it's kind of a stupid ending. But then I'm like, this is a family movie. It's, let's not. And I don't know, just the 3 movies, the operaticness, like the operaticness of the films. I get Once Upon a Time in the West because the Imperial March. Dun, 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 dun. I can listen to these songs. I hear it in baseball stadiums. I went to see a Yankees game. When they play the visiting team, they play the Imperial March. I think the video game, I think Wampa Stompa, the cheat code you put in to, change that. And then there's Star Wars Rogue One. It's just such a cool franchise. And I know George Lucas probably doesn't know everything that he created, but he did create such a cool universe. And I know going back to Brian De Palma, he watched it and he's like, he didn't understand it. And I don't know if it was that one or it's just eventually the title crawl between him or Lucas, that became the thing that separated it from everything else at the time. It took you back to the 1940s. So George Lucas made a nostalgic movie. He liked Akira Kurosawa, he liked serials, and he merged that into a story with great characters. I only wish if they do a Star Wars trilogy, the way Disney was kind of doling them out. Look at it. Look back at any of Disney's announcements and how many they have since retracted or just none of them been abandoned. Just because they announce a movie doesn't mean it's going to happen. Daredevil 2 was announced at, you know, 2003. Ben Affleck, oh yeah, Daredevil 2, and then a Ghost Rider 2, which was a different 2, but Blade not coming out. Just because they announce it doesn't mean it happens, but they announced so many Star Wars trilogies, and when Lucasfilm was bought by Disney, I was like, okay, that's not a bad deal, and that Fox was worse for me, but I understood the Fox deal because Star Wars alone, just owning that movie, the main one, that was a major driving force for Disney. It had to be. It wasn't too far after. And what was crazy is during that time, Fox had tried to buy Warner Brothers. You just think, what if some of these deals went through? What if? So once Disney comes on board, They really, really Disney. They out Lucas, but I think what made Lucas human or more like I don't know. I think he looked at it more as a collector. I don't know if he dealt with these deals one on one. Just something seemed different, and Disney has started announcing the Game of Thrones directors would have a trilogy. That's not happening. Ryan Reynolds after episode 8, not Ryan Reynolds, Ryan Johnson after episode 8 would have a trilogy. That's not happening. They just kept saying trilogies out of nowhere, and not that Star Wars doesn't deserve it, but I think you're like with Marvel, they have these movies, they announce so much in advance. I'm like, I don't think you need to do that with Star Wars because he announced these titles and it's I know it's like they need people to keep coming back, but I think Star Wars you could do one by one, or even if it's trilogies, you know. The story of Qui-Gon, it wasn't Qui-Gon's story, but Qui-Gon was the intro. It was Ben Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker's story throughout that trilogy. And episode 1 is like that that's Lucas full. He came back, he wrote I believe he had a divorce, whatever. But he went full on for this trilogy, and he hadn't been like a full-time filmmaker in a certain amount of time. But he also wanted to push digital filmmaking techniques. And what he did in 2002, I think it was the first digital print. And Robert Rodriguez, I think, I don't want to use the word student, but maybe he was someone associated with him. He picked that up. And in 2005, when Star Wars Episode 3 came out, Sin City comes out. And that only can happen because of digital. And people talk crap about digital, and I get digital, but digital made it easy for me to do this. I can't afford to film myself. Nobody can. Well, then maybe that helps gatekeep. It did. And if anything, maybe we're going to have to learn to gatekeep, but also all the content may not be the right use right this second. I've created stuff from years ago that I'm reposting here or posting. And reevaluating different times. Star Wars in 1995, this was it. Me, Star Wars 1990, I think back to that self and I try to think back of how I saw these characters for the first time. These questions I was asking my father, these situations I'm seeing in class. I'm thinking of The Empire Strikes Back, but I'm thinking, Pizza Hut. I'm thinking the bottle toppers. I'm thinking the toys, I'm thinking experiences with family, going out those nights. I'm thinking those nights before you go to school and renting a video game and staying up all night playing Rogue Squadron instead of doing your homework. And I think even I know Maddox, I like what he talks about, and I think child development is such an interesting thing. Not that I'm going to make a statement on it in any way right here. But as far as my development as, I guess, a young boy, talking about other people's experiences, Batman, wrestling, Star Wars. Kind of cliche. And I try to fight that word cliche as so much as I can as a human to the point where I think I avoid having human experiences because they're cliche, but they're not. I know it sounds stupid, but sometimes you can really resist what's right in front of you. I will get more into that in some sort of short story, but I just wanted to mention here. All right, so we're 45% in. I've talked about Star Wars. I'm still feeling good. Star Wars was a banner. Motion pictures, animated series. I watched Clone Wars, the first micro series, and then they had an animated CGI series, which I didn't like the animation. I watched the episode because it was based off of Notorious, the Alfred Hitchcock movie. I liked it. I want to go back and watch it. And now that it's complete, it's kind of great because watching and waiting for Star Wars, we had 3 years. MCU, we have movies to, whet our appetites. But 1999, watching that, like elementary school, 2002, middle school. So I'm going from 1999, we're starting PlayStation, N64, Super Nintendo's still there. 2001, I'm full into PlayStation, I'm into DVDs, I'm into music. Napster is a thing. All those other video games are still there, but I'm focused on this. One thing I do like about Toy Story 2, it's showing your children growing up sometimes. They leave things. They regret it, and sometimes seeing it, seeing that Riddler watch for me on eBay, I was like, I know, I keep harping back to this watch and I just hit my microphone, but it has that visceral feeling. And as someone that's probably said things, I really, really do feel bad about that. So I really do want to take back because going to these conventions, meeting people whose parents are probably my age and they have kids who are old enough to like have very well established thoughts, they're college age maybe, and they're telling me about their experience and like how their dad or blah blah blah. Not sorry, I don't mean blah blah blah. Just dot dot dot. Ellipses. Blah 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 sounds like I don't care. I want to tell you without, you know, etc. etc. without sounding condescending. My apologies. So these and Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront. That game was a whole new thing and I remember um I had a friend or no, I had a friend who didn't really like love the Star Wars, but he loved Knights of the Old Republic. He loved those games. I couldn't get into them because I guess, but that universe is so vast. It can get people in some way or another. It really is. And you're like, oh, it's not my thing, but I think there are Star Wars stories for everybody. I know when Kathleen Kennedy and they all wanted to tell more stories. If you listen to that word, they want to tell more stories. It's I think it's cool, and I think the coolest thing Lucas did up until Disney buying it was his Star Wars Legends, the books, canon. It was a very interesting time, 1977 till 2000, let's say 2014, 30, whenever Disney bought it. Lucasfilm, what he did for video games, he did a Star Wars fighting game, Star Wars Masters of Terrakasi. LucasArts was great. The original Star Wars Battlefront was so good. And then 2 overcame that. I haven't played the EA games. I've heard so many controversies, but why is there no Battlefront 3? I'm surprised Disney's letting this money sit on the table. Why is there no Knights of the Old Republic 3? Uh, some of these spin-offs are so good and so many talented artists. And when you think of the original Star Wars trilogy, Joe Johnston worked on that movie. He's the director of Captain America: The First Avenger. He also did The Rocketeer. He also did some other movies in between. He was someone I did on my director's experiment because I was familiar. So he was able to get back in there and really hit that home because he had that Rocketeer feeling, almost 90s. Not 90s, but he had that 90s action blockbuster when Captain America Civil War, not Civil War, the first Avenger came out. And of all the MCU trilogy, all the MCU characters, the Captain America trilogy is my favorite. I like Iron Man as well. Thor, Thor is different. Hulk doesn't have any real consistency. Ant-Man, I always will wonder what happened with Edgar Wright. Guardians of the Galaxy, James Gunn had these stories, but Captain America, Iron Man, and but Joe Johnston worked on this. So many people worked on ILM, and they didn't know how to make these special effects for Star Wars, so they created it. And when you watch that film in the 70s, 80s, even if you watch the original versions, it's impressive. And then when you see what Lucas did in the 90s, because he wanted younger audiences not to be turned off by it. Now, Star Trek did something similar. They did for their, I think, HD DVD release, and then eventually Blu-ray, they did a remastered of the 1966. So you'd have, they re-edited the entire show from ground up in order to do it in HD master. When shows were shot on film, they sometimes were edited on tape. So once you edit it on tape, it is now tape. Thank you, Benjamin. Han shot first. So I agree with you. I like that. I had a psychology teacher when I was talking about what's the big deal, and he didn't go off. He was very cool. We actually we got along, and I remember I was younger then, but he really respected my opinion in front of the class. And this is high school psychology, so it's just I always thought that was really cool. Um, because I think I was really insecure at that point because you feel like a nerd. And this is around 2005. Han did shoot first, and it was such a phenomenon. And I understand how people who aren't in it don't like it. Because I think sometimes we get older, we get bitter, we get jealous. Because sometimes we wish like something we liked. Because for me, I loved special features, and Hellboy pissed me off. Hellboy 2 is one of my favorites. But when it came out, I'm like, God, Guillermo del Toro's this 2.5 hour documentary, and this is 2004, so Batman didn't have its 2 disc belt. It would, but at this point, it didn't. And I thought, now I'm just so glad he did it, but he didn't do it then. The phenomenon of Star Wars, just for a young man, it meant a lot. And whenever I go to these conventions, it's so cool to see parents with their kids. Like I can't remember what convention, but the dad was in a Green Lantern outfit. Was going as John Stewart, and he has his daughter with him, and I was like, and then I've spoken to vendors, and they want their kids to have it, like sons, daughters. They just want to introduce them to it. They want them to play video games, and then you really see that parent Lion King stuff. I'm not gonna say Lion King shit, but that circle of life and your interests. And they always talk about DNA, but parents. So you get older and you learn about all these times you were introduced to things, so then you want to make it an important for your kid. But you also don't know, like, was this an event or this just happened to coincide? And like, hey, let's do this. You know. Sorry, just a little teary-eyed. It's it's so this being the fifth day in a row, I've been going into subjects that mean a lot to me that I haven't talked about. Now, it's not that they haven't been talked about by me or other people and different things. It's just I think I'm going back to when I first saw them, and it's just I repeat this. I tell my friends when I get interested or even research. Or I remember the first time I got into DVDs, like when you first open the door to creativity or learning. Like, say you don't know anything about cooking and you open that door from the internet and you're just, as someone that likes learning, or I didn't realize how I was learning is what I like, but what I like to learn. I think of when I learn the first initial time, it's any bonus level, think Super Mario Brothers or think Donkey Kong Country for Super Nintendo. You have 20 to 30 seconds. There's a lot of gold coins. Oh. And sometimes you realize after doing it a few times, there's a strategy. You just gotta go to get the most. You have to have some strategy. Originally, you run around all chaotic, try to do that, but and then you're chasing the one you missed. But if you have a consistent strategy, you'll get them all or most of them. But it's supposed to be fun. It's almost supermarket sweep. And growing up with supermarket sweep as a kid, there was the equivalent on Nickelodeon, which you'd go to Toys R Us, you'd get a cart, I think 5 minutes, and you'd fill it up. Star Wars toys, video game, Street Fighter, Burger King, Nickelodeon, all these things were tie-ins, and they surrounded you on a day-to-day basis. And we all talk about nostalgia, but why is it there? Because it was consuming us. And we look back, it's not the same. Well, we're not the same. And we can't see how we were as a kid, but at the same time, maybe we can, and then understand how kids. Because a lot of times, having worked with people who are older than me, I remember they tell me stuff, and I think I don't think I had the best response. It kind of like, "Oh, wow, you're old," but they grew up not too it seemed old to me, and then telling my story to people who were younger than me when I was working with them, they'd say, "I'm old." I'm like, "You think about it." I'm like, "Okay, that's what that feels like." And yeah, they say karma, you know, all that stuff, but um your entry point into certain things and like these specific Burger Kings or restaurants, I remember seeing them with parents. I remember certain after you do it after maybe a baseball game, just it's just times in your life, you know? And the marketing, and then you see it, and then you watch it, and it's not that bad. It's like, of course, they're trying to make you buy something, but the marketing has this heart to it. Like they're trying to sell you family. And I think that's what's so good about the marketing of the 90s, which if Sappy Sorcerer does anything to make an influence, like of course I want to be rich. I don't know if I want to be famous. I want to be someone that does this, but eh, I would hope that the people that do marketing take some lessons from what they were inspired by. Because I know a lot of things of just copying what they did. Like Burger King, Pizza Hut, all these old logos from when I was a kid have changed. Like for the Star Wars 99, they all had a different logo. Burger King, Pizza Hut, they all had this more edgy look, and then they went back, which I wanted when they changed, but now I want what they changed from what they changed. Or if anything, I wish they would have went in a different direction than retroactive. I like that retroactive logo. I would like them to keep it in our marketing, but I wish they would have progressed. And what's weird is us, a lot of us millennials, people who grew up in that, are dealing with this, and we want a lot of things back. But I think when we were growing up, things kept changing. And we were like, oh, the OG, but that wasn't the OG. OG for us. We always have to remember that. I've heard conversation, people like OG, and I'm like, I have to take a second, remember, maybe that's their first experience as OG or the original. But the original is sometimes so old you didn't even know it existed. That's where museums, but not that you want to correct people, but they're like, this was the OG for me because this is how it became part of my life. And that is what's so cool about physical media or even releases. That distribution of that title got into so many people's hands, caused stories, and years later, people are able to share stories based on that item from that release. I know that sounds silly, but when you think about it, should it have that much impact? Star Wars pizza boxes are still around from that period. Are all? No. Is there some? But the fact that it was Star Wars means it's going to be preserved. I think that's so cool. There was a picture of when you put the pizza on the box, there was that little thing that Pizza Hut used to have, that little, you know what I'm talking about. I wanted to put that in the video so bad, but I didn't think anyone would know what it was. I wanted it there, and I didn't put it in, but that's just nostalgia. The looking at the pizza, looking at the logo. I remember just seeing on the shelf Anakin on the Pepsi, Queen Amidala. That's Natalie Portman, Keira Knightley, and seeing the careers they had since then. Ewan McGregor, Hayden Christensen didn't have the career I don't think any of us expected, and I not that I'm glad. Like I'm not sure. I didn't do research on him, but I just remember he did Shattered Glass, and I saw him a few other times, and I was like, oh, it's a shame. I liked him, but Jake Lloyd, I think, had this issue with Star Wars because it kind of surrounded them, you know? And I think he got, unfortunately, sometimes the fans could take it out on the actors, and then even at that time, they weren't ready for it. Same, and that's happened in years, and different child actors have talked about that. That was probably be like the craziest thing of just his whole story of just being a kid who had been in movies to being the most centralized child on the face of the planet in 1999. and then just everything that had to go with. I don't know. And you would hear years after the fact about Star Wars, Episode 1. But if anything from this, I know it's a bit ranty. I am sorry. This one was a little bit more emotional for me today, so it was a little late. Um, I feel like I'm starting to repeat myself, but the individual releases of Star Wars are always fun. Episode 1, I know I want to do a Sappy Says, so that might come out next month, because I've done some already, you know, or maybe I'll do it sooner because I know that is a whole thing. And what I've learned is when you look at franchises and the individual movies, depending on when you grew up with them. So the original Star Wars trilogy I saw as a whole as a kid for the first time. So I didn't have to wait those 3 years. I waited a month to see them in between, so I had some wait. My dad was giving me just as a kid, like a month is a lifetime. So I had that feeling, and then growing up with them, and them still being there after he showed it to me. I didn't see him during that period, but I still had that one. And I can't say I thought of him every time I watched it, but he introduced it to me. And I haven't watched them in a while, so I will watch them. And I just really wanted to talk today about that experience of Star Wars, of just going back to when I first saw them and then trying to figure out immediately my peripheral before and after. I'm sourcing Star Wars from 97 as my entry point. There is so much I didn't talk about. There's so much that I'm sure that others will fill in. If anything, the trilogy and episode 1, because episode 2 came out 2001, so I think I'm like 12, 13. I was turning into a teenager at this point, and when you're turning into a teenager, you start to shed what you used to do. So 2001, WCW was bought out, and the invasion angle hadn't gone the way I wanted. It was WWF and WCW. Something I've wanted for years wasn't going. And with Pokemon, I remember I was in the fossil deck. So if you recall, it was red, blue, I mean green in Japan, but red, blue in America. Then yellow was the special edition, and then they had gold, silver. Then they kept going. So I was at yellow. I remember I got that as Halloween. I got it as a gift for not going out trick or treating. I know, but it was a good trade. I was like, I'll take it. I want to play it. And then I got just the candy bags. It was just a weird time. I think it was 1999 as well. And then so the fossil deck comes out, and I remember going to the cards, and the base deck had cards. Fossil deck, jungle deck did not repeat, and the fossil deck started repeating. So there's 150 Pokemon, and now we're having doubles. And I was like, I thought to myself, it was I'm maybe sixth, seventh grade. It might have been at the beginning of seventh, early sixth, but I'm like, wait, they could do this forever. And then that was it. I just stopped collecting Pokemon. And this was something that could get me out of bed. This is something like a Scooby snack that my mom would use almost to get me to do something. I know that's embarrassing looking back on, but Pokemon cards in the 90s, along with Star Wars and wrestling, was my life. Pokemon, Star Wars, wrestling. And there was other video games, but those three universi were so important to me, and they all structured what would go into later. I knew of movies would come, but intro point, right? Star Wars. So when I look back on 99, I can even go by the school I was, and it's like, you take a deep breath and you're like, I'm trying to remember what I was thinking. I'm like, but that was the whole focal point of my life is staying in these universes, learning about these universes, playing. And that's important. I think for kids, sometimes they grow up too fast. I think I took too long to grow up, to be honest. I think I went to school early, and then I was always a late bloomer. So I feel behind. I started early, but I feel behind. All these things. So we're at 27%. I don't think I'm gonna go the full 2 hours today. I just want to thank you for these just some of these talkings. As I would say it's musings, but that's musings with Maddox. Star Wars, it really means a lot. And when I was doing my initial, I'm sorry, I just want to just get all this out because I'm in the Nine of Spades period. So nines are letting go. So I feel like I just need to talk about this. Not that I won't talk about it in the future, but it's an emotional release. And I'm sure a lot of you can understand that, but I don't know. This means a lot. Seeing these tapes in a video store, and then just the titles up until 95, 96, 97, 98. That video store closed, the Pizza Hut's still there. But I might be sappy, and that's kind of the thing of this nostalgia. Try to enjoy things with people. And pretend you're a kid if someone's trying to introduce you to something. Ask them why they like it. It may not be your taste, but sometimes learn about why they like it before you say what you have to say. And then I think that could change it. Not that you're like, oh, it's the worst thing ever, but if someone liked it, they might not want to talk after that. And I'm not saying you have to be so considerate, well, I don't want to step on eggshells, they can deal with it. I'm not saying that. And the other person on the other side, feel free to disagree, but be positive. Star Wars Trilogy Episode 1. Those 4 movies have an impact on me. And Episode 2 and 3, some people can see it, but I see those on my videotapes before 2 and 3. There was a period in my life I was like, all right, I'm going to have Episode 2 and 3 on tape. And that never happened. So, is that a bad thing? No, but that was something I planned as a kid that didn't happen. The Star Wars trilogy probably wasn't what he planned it to happen. Better? Even the new one. Um, but yeah, so thank you so much. This was my soapbox. This is the 5th day in a row I did it, so thank you all. Thank you, Benjamin, for commenting. I really do appreciate that you all listened. I wasn't, I really, it took me a while to get going today. And with discipline and showing up every day, even with monkey wrenches, like I was saying with the Uranus, like I was working on it. I started emotional, and then I realized I got home. I could have done this on time at 10:30. I had to process this more because I did not start this day realizing I was going to do a Star Wars episode, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to say a lot of things. I don't know if they're all coherent, but maybe a later version of me will listen to this, or maybe you will. But anyway, thank you for listening. Specifically, if I take away 95, Star Wars 95 to 1999, maybe that's what I should have called this episode, even though I encapsulate everything. And the movies are there. People have opinions. I was talking more of my relationship and the marketing to it. A little teary, a little snotty, but thank you so much, everyone. I will be back either Sunday or Monday. I'm taking tomorrow off. Uh, I want to do this 5 days in a row, so this is like a Monday to Friday job. I made that a reality. I know you can too if you want. Um, Makeup and all. So 5 days in a row. Thank you, Substack or YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening, whenever you're listening. Because this is August 14th when I'm making this. If you do listen to this in the future, just know maybe your memories could inspire someone. It may not be who you want, and it may not even be someone from this country. It may not even be someone you meet. But so many people on the planet, so many stories. Yeah, I've been the Sappy Sorcerer. I will see you soon. Thank you so much.